Hi, boys and girls. I have another story for you. It's called This Far and No Further. Well, this story took place actually to me when I was a little girl. We lived in the state of Oregon, and in Oregon, it rains lots and lots and lots and lots. Matter of fact, so much so that people used to tease and say, if you lived in Oregon, you were a duck. But of course, none of us were ducks. But that's how they teased people because of all that rain. But the rain made Oregon very beautiful. It was green and lush. My father and mother, bought their very first home, and it was in the country. We were so tickled to have a place of our own. And Mother and Daddy decided that it needed to have very beautiful yard. Now, it wasn't huge, but they did make it very beautiful. Might of fact, soon after we moved there, my father took the tractor, and on this side of the house, he dug a sunken garden. He dug it out so it was about, probably this deep. And all along the four edges of it, he went and he got big round river rocks and he pushed them against the soil on the side of that. He and my mother came along and they planted little low growing rock plants, and they bloomed all different colors. Well, that was really exciting. And then he put a yard in the bottom of it, and you had to walk down little brick steps to get into it. And it had a big rose trellis with red and pink roses going over it. And up here, above that sunken garden, my mother planted a huge flower bed. It went the full length of that long sunken garden, and it had every color flower you could imagine. You know, we liked to bring flowers to church, and so Mother planted those flowers. So except for the dead of winter, we always had flowers to take to church, and it adorned our yard. Well, the backyard. My father really loved trees, and he really loved bushes. It took them a while, but they went and they bought trees and bushes till they had 50 different kinds. That's 50. That's a lot of trees and bushes. And they planted them all around the back and the sides of that yard. And they put the bushes in between the trees, and they were all blooming bushes. So they bloomed at different times, and they were really beautiful. And then in one of the corners, my dad made a fish pond. Now, you won't tell anybody, will you? But the fish pond was made out of the bottom of an old refrigerator that he had cut off, and he sealed it all inside. So it looked really good when you looked in, and it was put down in the ground. And then he put rocks all around it, and he planted bamboo behind it. And we got koi fish, which are like goldfish, but they're big, and they lived in the pond. Well, that wasn't all they did. They planted a beautiful long garden with a path that ran past the backyard, and it went all the way back to the chicken house. Garden all along here, And then on this side, there was raspberries and blueberries and strawberries and boysenberries. There was gooseberries and currants. They were all yummy, except for the gooseberries. But my mother liked them and the currants to make jelly out of. All that was along there. And then, clear over here to the edge of our property, they planted a little orchard. Now, there was more to the property that went out behind. And some years, my father planted all that into potatoes, and I remember having to pull all the weeds. It was a fabulous place, but there was one place that my sister and I liked best of all. If you came up our driveway, the driveway went here and the garage was back there. There was an embankment that went down, and it went down quite, you can't even see how far. It went down a long ways. And sometime, years and years before, there had been, the creek must have risen, and it had washed, there was trees along here, and it had washed all the dirt out along this half of those trees' roots. Now, those roots were big, and they came out like this, and then they went back in the ground again. And you know, little girls have imaginations. And I thought, those look like shelves, all those roots on top of each other with a hollow space in between. And my sister and I said, it can be a store. So we went in the house and we raided the garbage can. Mommy said it was okay. We took out soup cans and vegetable cans, and we took out little pudding boxes and cake mix boxes and cereal boxes. Our mommy let us. Matter of fact, she started saving things that she thought would be fun in our store. Well, we took all those things in our wagon, and you could go down further down the driveway, and there used to be some sort of a road that went down there. So this part was paved. So we went down with our wagon, and we went over to the quote store. You know, those boxes and cans couldn't be empty in those bottles and milk cartons and things. So anything that was liquid got filled with water, and anything that was powdered, or like cereal or things like that, cake mixes and pudding, we put dirt in those containers. And then we pretended that this end of that place that went way down was our house. So we would take our dolly buggy or our wagon, and we would go to the store, and we would pretend to buy things. We'd put them in our wagon, and we would pull them and bring them back to our house. And then we made mud pies, mud cakes, mud bread, you name it. Mud and water, well, dirt and water make wonderful mud. We loved to play down there. And there was another attraction just over here, beyond where we played, was a little bubbling creek. I don't ever remember playing in it. Maybe we were told we couldn't. I don't know. But it had water that ran all year over the rocks. Well, you know, somewhere during that time, we had started to go to church. We had never gone before. So we didn't know about Jesus. We didn't know that you could talk to him, and that's called prayer. And we didn't know that he would answer us. Well, that was amazing. We had a God up in heaven that actually cared about what was going on for us and around us. Well, that was amazing. A couple years after we moved to that wonderful place, my father decided the house was too small, and he built an extra room on the back of the house. And he made a brand new bedroom for my sister and I. You know, there's something interesting about my sister and I. We're 2 years, we were 2 years and one day apart. Do you know her birthday was on November 16 and mine is on November 17? So we always celebrated birthdays and things together. So we enjoyed living in the same room. Well, then my father took the front of the house and he took out the wall of the bedroom that used to sit here, and he made the whole front of the house into a brand new living room and dining room. Well, my mother, she'd always had old furniture. She took real good care of it, and she made sure we did too. But my father said, we're going to go to the furniture store and you can buy some new furniture for the living room. Well, that was real exciting. So she went and she picked out a new sofa and she picked out a chair to match. And my father bought a beautiful rug to put under that furniture in the living room. And the other end of that big long room was our dining room now. Well, months after this, it was late fall. And remember, I told you it rained in Oregon? So we were used to it. We didn't care. But this time, it rained. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and on and on and on. And it never stopped raining. Well, you know, something happens to the ground when you get that much water. Pretty soon, it won't soak it up anymore. And then we noticed something else happening. It was too cold now for us to go play in our store in our little house. Our toys had all been put away for the winter. But when we went outside, we noticed that that little bubbling creek, it wasn't little and bubbling anymore. The rocks were all covered, and it was full of brown, muddy water. And that water in the creek went higher and higher and higher. And it overflowed. And it filled up where our house used to be. It filled up where our little store was. It was left with the bank. Ooh. Well, right on the other side of that creek, beyond a few trees, there was a gravel plant. And they made gravel there. They had big machines that crushed rocks and made it into different sizes of gravel. Well, it was a big place. And on the other side of it was the river. Well, we'd never worried about that little bubbly creek, or we'd never worried about that big mighty river, because they never got out of their banks. That river, all the water in that river went rushing to the ocean. We only lived an hour and a half from the Pacific Ocean. But because the ground had soaked up so much water already, the river started getting higher and higher and higher. And then the water started going over its banks on both sides. We went to town on the big high bridge that was there, and we could look down, and that water was frightening. It was churning and going, and it was rushing, and it was spilling over. Well, the next day, when we looked out of our window, we noticed that that creek and the river now met in the middle of that rock crushing business. It was like one giant lake. The people couldn't go to work there anymore. because they couldn't get in because of all the water. Now, I'm sure my mother and daddy were concerned, but all the time we'd lived there, the little creek had stayed where it belonged and the river had stayed where it belonged. Well, now there was so much water that the next day, after I saw that huge lake that the creek and the river had made, I called Mommy. I said, Mommy, come look. And I was looking out the back door, and there was water clear at the end of our property, and the rain was continuing. Rain, 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 and it was beating on that water. And I thought, on this side of our property, there were bean fields, but this was the wrong time of year for beans. And the farmer had plowed the field, and I thought, maybe the water will go over the back of our land, and it will just go over into that big field. It wouldn't hurt anything now. There was no crops there, but for some reason the water didn't do that. Off and on all day, my sister and I went and looked out that back window. As the day wore on, that water got closer and closer and closer to our little house and its beautiful gardens. Well, pretty soon, that water filled all the area where my daddy used to plant potatoes. Then it came all the way around the chicken house. I don't remember that the chickens got hurt. They probably just roosted higher inside of their coop. By the time evening came, that water had gone through the orchard, through the berry plants. None of that had stopped it. And it was dirty, muddy water, and it was still raining. And I remember us saying, oh, dear Jesus, please stop the rain. We have enough now. Thank you for the rain, but please stop it. We don't need any more. Please. And we pleaded with Jesus to stop the rain. A couple hours later, I went and looked out the window again. And I was so excited. Mommy, come look. The rain has stopped. Jesus answered our prayer. The rain has stopped. And it had. You could see the top of all that muddy water. And it wasn't like it used to be with the raindrops falling all over the top of it. It was kind of flat. It wasn't that it was still because it was moving kind of like this. But there was no rain falling. And of course, in little girls' minds, I thought, well, the rain has stopped, so the water will just go away. But it doesn't work that way when you have a lot of water. Well, it was time for two little girls to go to bed, but there was too much going on. There was water coming at our house, and it was coming slowly. Now, it got to all those beautiful trees and bushes that went all the way around our backyard. And you know, in my little girl mind, I thought, the trees and bushes will stop the water. But what I didn't think about is there's holes between tree trunks and bushes and other trees, and the water just went through every crack there was in those bushes and between the trees. And it came right in. It went right over that fish pond. You know, I don't even remember what happened to our fish, but that dirty water filled in everything, and it was coming closer and closer. And then my sister and I realized something. We hadn't asked Jesus to stop the water. So we prayed again. Oh, dear Jesus, please, thank you for stopping the rain. Now, please stop the water. When you created the ocean, You told the waves that they could come just so far and no further. We thank you, dear Jesus. We know you can answer us. And we kept praying and kept praying. And the night wore on. How could we see that water out there? We had turned on the porch light, and it made a path of light over all that water. It was about this time when we followed my daddy and mommy into our new living room, dining room, and Daddy put a big, thick blanket over our dining room table. And I thought, what's he doing? Then he had Mother come, and they went into the living room, and they picked up that new sofa, and they carried it over, and they set it on top of the dining room table. We were never allowed to put anything on the dining room table other than dishes and food, of course, on top of a tablecloth. But Daddy said, we have to put the new furniture up so if the water comes in the house, it won't ruin it. So Mother got the chair, and Daddy helped her lift it up, and he sat it way on top of the sofa. Then he went over and he rolled up that new rug, and I don't remember where he put it, but he put it somewhere that was high enough that if the house flooded, it wouldn't ruin it. I don't remember if Mother and Daddy packed a little bag so we could jump in the car and drive away if that flood water came further. We kept praying, please stop the water. Don't let it go any further. Well, there was a back steps. They were made out of cement behind our house, and they were fairly high. As we stood watching that stream of light on that water got closer and closer and closer to us. What were we going to do? Was it going to flood our house? We kept praying. When the water got to the point that it touched those cement steps, God must have said, you cannot go any further. And it didn't. We didn't hear God saying that. But he might as well have said it out loud, because that flood water went to the edge of those steps and it stopped. It didn't go any further. We couldn't believe it. We kept watching. We thought maybe our eyes were playing tricks on us. But it didn't go any farther. It went as far as those steps and it stopped. And it kind of sat there and swirled around. Well, little girls don't know either that it takes a long time for floodwaters to go down. But every day we would watch to see if it had gone back, and it was making its way slowly backwards away from our house. Oh, yes, our pretty yards and our flowers and gardens and everything, they were covered with mud, but nothing that a rainstorm wouldn't clean off. But our house, it was not ruined at all. And it didn't go in the greenhouse. It didn't go in the garage. We have such a wonderful Father in heaven that listens to little girls praying and answers their prayers. I want you to remember to pray and talk to him, because he loves to hear you and he wants to help. Thank you, boys and girls. We'll see you next week. Bye-bye.